Welcome to Sideline Sports Podcast. If you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast. What's going on, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sideline Sports Podcast. I am the host, Alex Naveja, where if you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast. If you guys are enjoying the episodes we're putting up, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below, hit the thumbs up, comment down below what kind of episodes you guys want to see as well. I am all ears as far as what you guys want to see, what you guys want us to cover, and also hit the notification bell down below so you guys know when we are uploading. Also, give us a follow on all of our social media platforms on TikTok, on Facebook, on Instagram, and on Twitter. Always trying to stay busy, especially with college football just around the corner. High school football starting this week. We are definitely going to be putting some high school football coverage as well. Planning on interviewing top athletes or top players as we cover high school football, as I will be with the NFHS Network broadcasting games, and after the game planning on interviewing some players and getting that up on TikTok and giving them a little love, a little exposure. So be on the lookout for that on TikTok. We'll put some stuff on Instagram and on Twitter. But enough about me. What about the man on my left right here? He's making his Sideline Sports Podcast debut. He so happens to just work for USCFootball.com covering the Trojans. He goes by Connor Morrissette, and he is a brand new face to Sideline Sports Podcast and a brand new face to the USC football scene. What's going on, Connor? An absolute pleasure to have you on. What's going on?
Not much, Alex. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. That was a great intro.
Yeah, man, you know what? Absolutely deserving of the big intro. I mean, any friend of Steven Morales is a friend of mine. So, I mean, he couldn't stop raving about you and the talents that you have for writing and covering high school sports for such a long time. But now having the opportunity to move into college football, and it's not just any college football program. You got SC, baby. Like, you got the fight on going on. So, how has that been treating you?
Yeah, it's been great so far. I started in January for a different company, and then I just started with USCFootball.com actually a month ago today. So you're getting me on my 1 month anniversary. But yeah, it's been great. Going through spring practice was really informative, really cool to see. And now going through fall camp has been awesome. And yeah, I'm excited. I know you're excited for the season. I'm excited for the season too, because I think this team has some potential, and we'll see. They could go far. They could win the Pac-12. That's certainly on the table. So yeah, I'm really excited, new on the scene, but just really happy to be there. And I've loved what I've done so far.
First off, congratulations on the month anniversary. I mean, that's huge. Making out the first month of being on the job and getting to check out the training camps and such. And it's got to be an absolute big deal. I mean, with the season starting next week, what have been some differences before we jump into SC football? I mean, other than the obvious, what have been some of the differences between covering the high school football scene and then covering the college football scene?
Yeah, first I'd just say the access, because when you're covering high school, if you know the coach, you can just show up at a practice. You have a good relationship with the coach. You can talk to players. Even during practice, they might pull a player aside and say, hey, you can talk to him whenever you need to. And it's a little bit different at USC, of course. The media access, it's much more limited. They do a great job for a college team, but you can't really watch much practice. So when the practices are open to the media, we get like a 15 to 20-minute viewing period, and a lot of it is warm-ups and then a first few drills that they do. And then after, a few select players and coaches will speak with us. And then between that period that we can watch, and when practice is over, we have to go into an academic building and just, either work or twiddle our thumbs until the guys come out. So the access is definitely different, but I expected that. And what's cool too is there's a few guys on the team that I did cover in high school, so it's been nice to reconnect with them. But yeah, I'd say the biggest thing is the access. That's the first thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, it's absolute game changer. I mean, in high school, you could just show up to any practice and talk to the coach whenever you like, or even just book a phone appointment and talk to them like that, or even maybe the day of the game, depending on who the head coach is. You could just go down on the field and talk to them, and they'll be more than happy to talk to you and give you a couple minutes of their time to be able to tell you a little bit about the team. But now let's talk a little bit about some USC football. What have been your impressions so far of the team? What's as far as some guys have been lost in the draft. They're going to have to work with some new guys here on the team. But what have been your first impressions so far?
Yeah, first impressions, they definitely should be better than a year ago. The transfer portal additions that they've had come in and a couple of freshmen I think are going to contribute. Those two factors have really benefited the team. And even though they haven't played anyone yet, just the spring game against themselves and they're going against each other in practice every day, talking to players and coaches, the depth, especially on defense, it's just much better than it was a year ago. So USC fans, of course, will remember the implosion against Tulane and playing poorly in the Pac-12 championship against Utah. The defense is definitely going to be better than it was a year ago. The question is how much better. That's going to determine the ceiling of the team. I think it's going to be pretty good. So I have them going 11-1, I think, and making that Pac-12 championship game. So what I've seen so far is just a team that has one goal in mind, and it's to win a national championship. And Lincoln Riley's talked about how last year he said that was the goal, but maybe the team didn't believe it. He might not have believed it either. This year they really do believe it, and they think they have a chance to do something special. So it's all going to be about the defense this year. I expect the offense to be really good once again. Maybe a couple questions with the offensive line, but everywhere else looks really, really talented in terms of the skill groups. So yeah, the buzz and the energy around campus is good right now. This unit thinks they have a chance to be really good, and I think they do too.
I know the defense was a big time question mark for USC. Definitely blew some big games. I mean, lost against Utah twice over at Utah. We all know how tough it is to play at Utah. Then the Pac-12 championship game, the defense just falling apart. And I just felt like the pattern has always been high scoring game to accumulate or to accommodate for the poor defense that they had last year. And as you mentioned, Tulane as well, dropping the Cotton Bowl there. I just felt like if they had a better defense, I think personally they could have made it to the college football playoffs last year had they had beat Utah and had a better defense. I think they could have been up with the top dogs and could have been in that equation for the national championship game. But you mentioned they addressed the defense. Can you maybe get a little bit more into detail as far as what has been addressed? Because it looked like Lincoln Riley decided to give his DC a second chance and say, you know what? We're riding with you again. We're giving you another chance this year because we have some big implications this year.
Sure. They've added a lot of transfers on defense. At every level of the defense, they have an impact guy who will come in and play right away, if not multiple of those guys. So just starting with the front seven, and that's probably been the talk of the camp so far, the defensive line. They brought in Jack Sullivan, who was at Purdue for 5 years. He's a 6-year senior. So a lot of Big Ten reps. He can play on the inside of the defensive line and on the outside, a versatile piece. Bear Alexander was a freshman on Georgia last year who had a sack and a tackle for loss in the national championship game against TCU. He was only being used on third downs, didn't like that, so he hopped in the portal, and USC has brought him in, so he's another interior defensive lineman who USC expects to have a huge year. Anthony Lucas was a 5-star recruit. 2 cycles ago, he spent 1 year at Texas A&M. He's an edge rusher. He transferred to USC. So just right there, that's 3 guys. There's a 4th defensive lineman too. Jamil Muhammad was a quarterback at Vanderbilt, then transferred to Georgia State, played defense, and now he has 1 year of eligibility remaining. He's going to play on the edge of the line as well. So they brought in 4 guys on that defensive line who they expect to come in and have a really big impact. So I think just right away, before a ball is even snapped, they've transformed that defensive front, which has been huge. The linebacking core wasn't very good a year ago, so they brought in Mason Cobb, an Oklahoma State transfer who was second team all Big 12 last year. Expectations are high for him. He looks like a day 1 starter at USC. And then in the secondary, I forgot a defensive lineman. I can circle back in a second too. So there's actually 5. And then in the secondary, they brought in a cornerback named Christian Roland Wallace, who was a 4-year starter at Arizona, who expectations are really high with him. The last guy, the defensive lineman who I skipped, Keon Bars, was also from Arizona, and he's just a big guy in the interior as well. He was, I think, all Pac-12, a second-team guy 2 years ago. I don't think he qualified last year, but they've brought in guys who either have really high ceilings in terms of The younger players like Bear Alexander and Anthony Lucas are guys who have a lot of college football experience, who've played 2, 3, even 4 seasons, some of these guys, even 5 in the case of Jack Sullivan. So I think that's why people are so excited about the defense. There are some good returning players too, and I can talk about them in a little bit. But the fact that they've really added a good core, and a lot of those guys got here back in January and spent time with the team during spring and now are in their second camp with USC. It's a lot of turnover, and that might have some people saying, oh, I don't know how good the team's going to be. It's a lot of new faces, but I just think the depth of quality that these guys have added are going to make a huge difference. And I expect fans to see that on day one when USC plays San Jose State coming up in a week and a half.
Absolutely. I mean, just because they're new faces, it doesn't mean that you can't craft them to be fine football players as well. I know you said you wanted to circle back to as far as I think it was the D line is concerned. You wanted to circle back. It's 5 new players.
Yeah, so the last guy was Keon Barrs, who I mentioned, and then just some returners too on the defense who will have a big year. Safety Kalen Bullock, some mock drafts have him being a first-round pick, so he's a guy who comes back. There's a freshman named Tackett Curtis at linebacker who the staff is really excited about. Eric Gentry transferred from Arizona State 2 years ago. He was a freshman All-American at ASU, battled some injuries last year, played a big role. If he's healthy, he's battling some stuff right now. He'll be a big player in that linebacking group. So even though it is a lot of new faces from the transfer portal, like I said, the fact that the defense is just so much more deep, it's deeper than it was a year ago. That makes such a big difference. And they don't have to be a great defense. I think they have the potential to be a great defense, but if they're just good, the offense that Lincoln Riley has, between him calling the plays and just the guys he has on the team with Caleb Williams and a bunch of other really, really talented players, that the defense isn't going to be asked to do too much in some games because the offense is going to be so talented. So that's the recipe for USC. Score a lot of points and then have a defense that's good enough to win a shootout.
So it sounds like defensively, they have certainly addressed those woes, blowing some big time games, not making the college football playoffs, losing in the Cotton Bowl. And they realize that. And it sounds like they have addressed the necessities and have addressed where the Achilles heel of the program is. I know earlier you mentioned that there's some question marks on the O line as well.
Yeah. So they have to replace 3 offensive linemen, which that's never good. But they've added 3 guys from the transfer portal. There's that word again. So the expected starting group, the 2 guys who come back, Jonah Monheim is going to be at left tackle. He played right tackle and right guard a year ago. I spoke with him yesterday, spoke with Coach Henson, the offensive line coach. And Jonah Monheim, he's another guy that has a chance to be a first-round pick coming up in April in the NFL draft. He's just so consistent, and he's the best lineman on the team by a pretty wide margin. So the fact that they can just put him at left tackle and not really worried about it, that's really huge for this offensive line. Justin Dietich is a 6-year senior who is going to start at center. That's his natural position. He played some guard a year ago, but he's going to be at center. So the 2 most important positions on the line, the left tackle and the center, are your 2 returners. So that's encouraging. The other guys who've come in, so now we get into the transfers. At the guard spots, you have Jared Kingston, who was at Washington State for I think 3 or 4 years, played a lot of left tackle, played some left guard. He's actually starting at right guard for the Trojans. So another experienced guy who's played a lot of football. At the other guard spot, the left guard, Emmanuel Prenion from Wyoming. He spent 2 or 3 years with the Cowboys, and he wasn't really a highly touted guy coming out of high school. He has really developed well. He's big. He's becoming an NFL prospect. So he's just a really talented guy. I think in terms of ceiling, he might have the highest ceiling of anyone on this line in terms of pro potential. So he slots in at left guard. You might see some growing pains with him. Coach Henson talked about how he needs to work on his conditioning, and he's new. He didn't transfer in January. He transferred after spring practice. So they're still working some kinks out there. And then at right tackle, Michael Tarquin is from Florida, University of Florida. He transferred in. He's being pushed the hardest, according to Coach Henson, by Mason Murphy, a returner. So that right tackle spot is still up for grabs. I expect it to be Michael Tarquin, but it could be Mason Murphy. So overall, it's 3 new faces, a lot of new guys, of course, which isn't really great for an offensive line. They need to gel. But Josh Henson, for my money, is one of the best offensive line coaches in college football. I think the only thing that could really derail the USC season is if there are some major injuries along the offensive line. I expect this group to gel. Maybe they have some growing pains to start the season, but there's just too much talent there for them not to be good enough to protect Caleb Williams. Will there be some breakdowns? Will there be some plays that they'll wish they want back? Of course. But I really think this group is talented enough to do what they need to do to win USC a lot of games.
And protecting Caleb Williams is going to be the number one objective. I mean, this is a guy that you and I talked about it before the show. He is projected to be maybe the number one overall pick for the upcoming draft for the next season, or he can even be the number two pick. And let's be real, he actually suffered some injuries at the back end of the season as well. You saw that he wasn't really able to run the ball in the Pac-12 championship game against Utah, and that's a world of a difference. That's a part of his game. If you can't protect him, then you take out a huge part of his game, and it becomes a little easier to defend against Caleb Williams. So I think the O-line and having to address that, I think that's going to be big too. And you got to protect your biggest asset on the field as well. You don't allow Caleb to work, you're in for some serious trouble.
Yeah, certainly. And he got hurt in that Pac-12 championship game. He pulled his hamstring on a long run, so it wasn't even a lack of protection in that game that got him hurt. He just maybe didn't stretch out enough before the game. I don't know. You never know with those injuries. What happened though last season was the offensive line. It just they played so much they just wore down. And Brett Nealon, the center, got hurt. A lot of guys ended up being banged up, which meant USC had to throw some guys into the fire a year ago, and that really didn't work out that well. Mason Murphy had a tough time playing tackle against Utah in the Pac-12 championship. So the hope this year is that the team will stay healthy, of course, but that they'll learn from last year and have guys ready to go who maybe wouldn't be or weren't ready to go a year ago, or have some freshmen that could come in, which is tough. You don't want to rely on a freshman, but I think they just know they need to be a little bit deeper because injuries do happen. And a lot of guys played over 1,000 snaps on that line, which is a lot of football. So a lot of opportunity for something to go wrong. They just need to be deeper. And that's one of the biggest questions heading into the season.
And certainly you're not going to find out until you go through the season and you see what your depth is. And the best thing you can do, hope for no injuries, and you can kind of minimize that snap count that you're going to have as well. And I mean, I want to talk a little bit about the schedule as well. I mean, you look at the last time they're going to be in the Pac-12 conference, and you see they get a schedule to play against both Oregon and Utah. It's got to be a fun little conference schedule for sure.
Yeah, the schedule sets up really well, in my opinion, for a team that has high goals, because just looking at it, the first few weeks, they're really not going to be challenged. And if they are challenged, that means they're not playing very well. So San Jose State, Nevada, Stanford, new coach. They might be the worst team in the Pac-12. At Arizona State, new coach. They're going to be down there. At Colorado, new coach. We all know with Coach Prime, they have some talent, but what the heck is that going to look like with all the turnover? Against Arizona, that's that's definitely the toughest game to start the season, but their defense was so bad last year. On offense, Arizona will be good, so that'll be a good test for the USC defense for sure. But I have some serious questions about Arizona's defense. So just starting the year, that's 1, 2, 3, that's 6 games. USC should come out of the gate 6-0, and those 6 easy games will allow the team to work some kinks out, to figure out what works, what doesn't work, and then be at their best when they play at Notre Dame, against Utah, against Washington, at Oregon, against UCLA. The back end of the schedule is loaded. It's really, really hard, but the team knows that they'll manage guys through those first 6 weeks. They won't take any injury risks. I think it sets up nicely because you can really learn a lot those first 6 weeks. Don't have to take any risks. Just do what you think will be the best case scenario for your team. And then that way, in the second half of the season, you're ready to go. You know exactly the best guys to play where, the best plays. And I think that really sets up huge for him. Of course, though, you got to stay healthy. So that's the biggest factor for those first few games. Because if a lot of injuries pile up towards the end of the season and there just isn't as much depth as we anticipated to begin the year, that's a lot of really talented teams USC is going up against. So that's the area that I'm concerned about if it happens.
I mean, well said. Absolutely well said. And it's just, I think the name of the game, yeah, staying healthy is going to be huge, and missing out on a starter, whether that's offensively, defensively. And that gets pretty tough to have to dig into your sideline and have to have a guy he's on the practice squad. But I mean, if he's not like really ready, that's going to be a tough responsibility for all of that. And going back to the point that you made as far as like the first half of the season to have, as we say, it's quote unquote easier opponents. I think it's much better to have easier opponents the first half than the second half because at least in the first half, you know how your team is going to play. You have your rhythm. You already know what the team is going to look like. So when you get to this second half of teams going against Utah, Washington, Oregon, UCLA, at least you'll know what your team is capable of. You'll know, hey, what's the injury report looking like? Hey, we're looking pretty complete right now. Maybe we're suffering some injuries here and there, but it's nothing major. So I like the way the schedule for USC stands right now. Easier first half, tougher second half. At least you know what your team is going to be up against and what you have.
Yeah, and the toughest game for me is the game at Oregon. I think Oregon is the team that's recruited at a better level than USC, the only team who's recruited at a better level than USC over the past 5 years. That game is sandwiched between Washington and UCLA at home. So if USC wins a shootout or gets into a shootout against Washington, the team that I think is going to have the second best offense in the Pac-12 the week before, you just got to wonder how much will they have left in the tank going to an Oregon team that defensively with Dan Lanning should be much improved from last season. I think that's going to be the most exciting game on the schedule for me, the most intriguing game. It's tough to say that on August 17th, but I think it has the potential to be the most exciting game. That Washington game could be great too. We all remember the UCLA game last year. The Utah games have been great, but the Oregon game is the one that intrigues me the most.
Absolutely. That's the one that really pops out at you. And it's the fact that it's at Autzen Stadium, that's even more. So the fact that they've got to adjust to the climate that's going to be out there in November. It's definitely really cold in Eugene. So they have to take that into consideration. And Oregon, that is going to be the team that's going to be the biggest challenge. Because if you ask me, it could be Oregon and USC in the Pac-12 championship game this year. I mean, that's just my prediction. As you said, it's only August 17th. I don't want to jinx anything for any programs out there, but that's the way I see it for sure.
Yeah, and the way it works, if you lose that game, that could potentially you don't always get the rematch. Like last year, I don't want to say USC was lucky, but they were, I guess, a little bit lucky to get Utah again in the Pac-12 championship. Sometimes if you lose that head-to-head game, that could be the downfall and why you don't make that Pac-12 championship. So that has a lot of that implications that game does. Additionally, outside of just being a really exciting game.
And just to kind of finish things up, I know earlier in the show you said you have them 11-1. Did you say that one loss? Do you think is that your prediction against the L against Oregon, or who is your one now?
Yeah, it would probably be Oregon. I think Washington too, potentially. I just think USC is going to be so jacked up to play Utah, and there's some questions about Cam Rising. By October 21st, he probably will be healthy, but he might not be ready to go to start the season. Utah lost some guys to the NFL draft, so I don't think it'll be Utah, but Washington or Oregon, and I lean towards Oregon because it's on the road.
So there you have it, guys. USC football. It starts next Saturday. Don't miss out on the action that's going on there on August 26th. It will be against San Jose State. Make sure to get you guys the tickets. It will be at the Coliseum, so you guys can make sure to stay up to date and catch the action that's going on there. But that's all the time we have left here on Sideline Sports Podcast. We thank you all so much for tuning into this one. If you guys like this episode, please give it a thumbs up. Comment down below your predictions for USC this year. Subscribe to the channel and also hit the notification bell so you guys know when we're uploading episodes. We've got a lot of coverage coming up with UCLA football next week. We still have plenty of coverage coming at you guys. And of course, NFL's going to start up as well. We've got to break down the Rams and the Chargers in the offseason and see what's been going on in their offseason. We haven't gotten a chance to talk any NFL football here on the podcast, so be on the lookout for that episode. And once again, on my left-hand side, a beat reporter for USC football, and Connor Morrissette. He has been here with us today, breaking it all down. Connor, once again, thank you so much for jumping on the show with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Alex.
And once again, a huge congratulations to yourself in getting the gig with USC football and being the beat writer. I'll definitely be seeing you out there at the Coliseum next Saturday. I'll be out there as well. Be on the lookout for a TikTok video, Instagram video, just talking about the USC season moving forward. But I'm Alex Naveja from Sideline Sports Podcast saying thank you so much for tuning into this one. If you're not on the sideline, it's not Sideline Sports Podcast, a source to SoCal sports news. Have a good one, everybody. Hasta luego. Have a good one.